Hello and welcome to the very first Xena Warrior podcast. My name is Vera and I'm joined by two wonderful people.
I'm Livy.
And
I'm Katie.
Hello. We have just come off watching the entire show, 6 seasons. Once we were done, we sort of wanted to dig into the history of the show and realize that it's not really part of the television canon as much as it absolutely should be.
Everybody should be talking about it 100% of the time, all day, every day. All conversations should involve Xena.
Yeah, so I've seen it before, and you guys, this was your first time watching, and that's why it was such a shock for you, because it's so good.
Right.
Right? Everybody liked it, right?
We all, it's safe to say, really liked it.
Yes.
But I definitely had a preconception that it wasn't a serious show, that it was a very silly show, sort of like a B movie, but television.
Right, and I had the same, issue, I think, in the 90s, so I didn't watch it because I think I probably saw a couple minutes of it and made a snap judgment that I have, in the last few months, have found out is completely incorrect. And I feel bad about that, and we're going to remedy that right now.
Yay! Well, I'm glad I was the hipster of the lot who had seen her since her inception on Hercules, so I'm very excited to... I mean, rewatching the show, I was just like, it was a completely new experience as an adult, seeing something.
And you had a lot of doubt about it because you gave us disclaimer after disclaimer.
Because
don't worry,
a lot of people...
It gets better. And then we started it and we were like, it's great. This is going to get better?
Right. Meanwhile, I was like, okay, just let them do what they're doing. Don't say anything. Just let it happen. So we are going to talk about the show. We're going to dissect the hell out of it.
Yes.
And we're going to bring it into the canon.
Exactly. No, that's, it's sort of not like it's not in there, but well, in a way it's kind of not, because partly I had recently gotten mad seeing, the critics, Mads Ellerseits and Ellen Sepinwall wrote a book called TV the Book. Mm-hmm. And it just came out, and it has these, very long lists of the 100 best shows on television ever, and then even longer or the same amount of length list of just their honorable mentions of stuff that they like. And I think it's really egregious that this show is not even in the honorable mentions when you have, the only example that's coming to my head right now in the honorable mentions is Phineas and Ferb or whatever that cartoon is.
Oh, yeah.
But there was just I'm sure great.
I bet Lucy likes it.
Exactly. But just for the amount of things that it was doing at the time, for its sort of importance in representation and for fandom, it should be in lists like that all the time.
It's a tremendously
significant
show.
Yeah.
It's significant back then, and it should be significant now.
Yeah.
You look at something like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which continues to be huge. People are always making references to it. Critics still love it. Fans continue to be fans of it and to keep the memory of it alive.
Yeah.
And at least from where I am, I don't see that kind of love for Xena. It feels like much more of a footnote kind of in TV history, if anything. And I think that's really unfair because Xena was on at the same time as Buffy and was doing so many of the same things as Buffy, and not just a lady kicking ass on TV, but a long-running story with characters that change over time, an elaborate mythology and a backstory that all hangs together, continuity that goes for days.
It's great.
It's amazingly consistent as a 6-season show, and you would never know that from the way people talk about it.
Yeah, people accept vampires and vamp face, but they kind of have a problem with kung fu style silliness. Right. And I think that's what maybe...
and we'll get into this as we go along a lot.
Yes.
Xena, I think for me, always had that level that was slightly harder to crack. People always made fun of Buffy's name, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm never going to watch a silly show like that. They both have these kind of
almost oddly the same name scheme.
Yeah, and
in the 90s.
I think that Xena is doing a lot more crazier things in terms of tone per episode, comedy, drama, mixing all these genres. It can be very goofy and that is not a criticism of it. That's
all.
Part of its charm and part of why it's excellent.
But you have to be willing to accept that as a TV watcher. Like if you only want serious things.
Yeah, so I think it has like it's like a harder nut to crack in terms of trying to get people to watch it.
Buffy's pretty goofy too.
It is. And this is the thing, like I don't want it to be at all be a competition. It's not like a Buffy versus Xena. Let's not be doing that.
We love
room
Buffy.
In our hearts for both
we
of
absolutely
these shows.
like Buffy was one of my biggest shows.
And
at
we'll
the
eventually
time.
get into this, but from watching Xena, it's pretty clear that the two shows were talking to each other.
Yeah,
There was a lot of like
So
interchange
much,
between
so
them.
much.
And I think for that very reason, like if you love Buffy, you should be watching Xena.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Xena possibly will have a reboot soon at some point in the future, and hence this is another reason why we sort of wanted to revisit the original. Without kind of getting into everyone's issues of like it should have the original people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Just we want it to be discussed. We want it to be watched. We want it to talk about it, and we want everybody to love it as much as we do, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's on Netflix.
No one can ever love it as much as we do.
Yes, us who've just only had it in our lives for
a few months.
6 months. Well, you for 20 years,
yes,
but yeah, us for a few months. That being said,
Shall we get into it?
Yeah, get into. Well, we can kind of get into like why we started to watch it.
Sure.
In the first place.
Yeah, this just happened. Why a few months ago did this happen randomly like this?
Well, Vera and myself, Katie, were at a fan convention, and it was a convention that is focused on vidding. During the opening programming, they had a sort of history of fan vids from the last,
10 years, I believe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry.
Of the con,
yes.
back.
Way longer than 10 years. Sorry.
Yeah.
The newest vid that they showed was from 2006, which was this vid.
Right, and so, it was a lot of flash vids, and then the last one was a vid called These Two Arms by Killa, which was a Xena vid, and it was really beautiful, and I had only really ever experienced this show kind of in a few vids that were really popular, so that was my perception. I had these vids, and then, like, my sort of osmosed preconception of what the show was like, and loved that like experience so much that I was just kind of like, all right, it's time for us to sit down and watch this show. And I knew that Vera loved it, and that it could be like a fun project for us. Not having any TV, I think, at the time.
And I was like, all right, let's try it out with all these disclaimers, and it happened. And I was just, you don't understand how happy it made me that you guys were okay with like the silliness immediately, like right off the bat.
I think it's. We'll talk about it, but I think that's one of Xena's charms.
Well, the heart was like also there, and that's what I'm interested in.
You don't enjoy Xena in spite of its silliness. You enjoy that spirit. That's, I guess, integral to what the show is. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
So we want to kind of like each episode of Xena Warrior Podcast, we'll discuss 2 episodes. We'll try not to go heavy on the spoilers, because if people are just starting out and want to like watch along with us, that's, we won't spoil you.
We will be trying to preserve your innocence.
Yes, which you guys, man, there were some episodes where you guys didn't know, and it was so amazing.
That is the danger. It is a show that, started in 1995.
Yep.
Right, so spoilers abound.
Yeah.
I certainly knew a bunch myself. So we're going to try to not reference too much,
like in a very obvious way,
because then hopefully like people who love the show will listen, but also the goal is to get more people, more Katie and Livy's to hop onto Netflix and to Hulu.
We want to convert people like Eli converts people.
Who? Get ahead of yourself.
Sorry.
Before we can talk about Xena proper, we have to mention the fact that Xena was not the original introduction of the character of Xena.
Yes. Xena was born on Hercules.
Yes, and born into the mid-1990s, in which the TV landscape was kind of full of Herculeses. Yes. Like there was a lot of sci-fi fantasy syndicated TV on at the time.
Starring men.
That's right. So Xena, well, again, I'm getting ahead of myself, but the show, Xena's show is like the first time a female-led show since The $6 Million Woman, I believe.
Yeah, stuff like that. You had, was Bionic Woman a thing?
You mean starring I forget her name, and Katie
and,
Sackhoff.
You know, and like Charlie's Angels, you had that kind of situation.
Kind of a long time.
It's just been it's been
like
a long time.
'90s.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yeah.
So there's a big gap between like the Wonder Woman era and Xena.
The Xena era.
But they didn't, you know, when they conceived the character on Hercules, they didn't initially immediately know that there was going to be a show. You know, they were going to kill her off at the end. Basically, she was conceived for this great 3-episode arc. Apparently,
It's the very first season of Hercules.
yeah. So I mean, they wanted to get like a cool lady in there immediately, so that was pretty great. I personally, for sure, fell in love with her from that because I was sitting around watching Hercules. Yeah, I mean, like it's just so funny because I must have totally dropped Hercules, but even though I claim that I must have seen it all, but I don't remember any of that show
Yeah, I
other
bet
than
you
those
didn't.
3
You
episodes.
were fickle.
Like-
Xena strode into town, and you were like, "Take me with you."
Yeah.
This Hercules guy, who?
I mean, I distinctly remember it aired at 10:30. Hercules, for me, 10:30 to 11:30, and 11:30 to 12:30 was Xena.
At night?
Yeah,
On
Saturday
Saturday.
nights on
You were
CBS.
a sleep-deprived child.
No, but I just remember like counting down, like literally staring at the clock, waiting for it.
Waiting
So-
for Hercules.
Well, waiting for Xena. But yeah, so it was. What did you just watch those, Katie?
Yes.
Like you just had caught
Yes.
up with the Hercules.
Yes, I did.
What did you
Yeah.
think?
So number one, I've probably seen 4 episodes of Hercules now, these 3 being part of the 4. I'm not like inspired greatly to go back and watch more Hercules because I think when they spun this show off, they made an entirely different show that was doing a lot of very interesting things. And this one does not seem to be. But I think that it was very fun to have gone backwards
Yeah.
after watching all of Xena to see the introduction of her character still in her, you know, warrior part warlord phase, like
10 years ago
the-
mode.
yeah,
Yeah.
10 years ago mode. It's sort of not because having watched Xena, and not to be spoilery, but they do kind of like increase the level of her badness
Misdeeds, yeah.
based on misdeeds, yeah.
But this was at the end
when you
of
first
her run.
meet her, she seems
Yeah.
a little like almost like softer even than the Xena that you know already from Xena. So it's a fun little it's interesting to see the genesis of the character
Yeah,
change
absolutely.
from the development.
Not
from
only
the
just
show
like as a
to-
character, but also like her looks. And,
Her looks, yeah.
just all sorts of like her chakram was initial like from the Hercules, but it was pretty striking to see her kind of use it like to kill people on Hercules.
And it's such a perfect, just chakram aside. It's a great weapon choice, I feel like, for her and this character, just on a like symbolic level. It's
'Cause
like
the
it's such a it's a circle, and you're just like it's more feminine as a thing instead of like a sword. Not to get too
Interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah,
I
like,
see.
I like that's her, and it's different. It's not something that I had ever.
And I
seen
like that
before.
it's so maybe this is a feminine thing too, but it's indirect. It bounces off other things before it hits its target, which is such a visual spectacle, but is also just very intelligent.
Yeah, it's really smart.
She
that
doesn't need a
chakram.
direct line of sight to kill
Not
people.
that she's an
That's
evil.
right. The chakram goes wherever the script tells it to go.
And can kill or not based,
Yeah,
on,
based
the
on the
needs
script.
of the script.
I'd love to talk about Xena's first scene in
Yes.
all of the Hercverse.
Okay, go for it.
She walks into town wearing her like red and green Christmas outfit, which is what I call that. Not her warrior garb. She
With the
looks-
soft hair, the lighter soft hair.
with light soft hair. She looks like this very glamorous peasant girl. She's leading her horse, and she's set upon by a bunch of dudes. And you're like, oh no, poor peasant lady, what's going to happen to you? And she fights them off. And you're like, oh, it's one of those. It's like the opening scene of Buffy, where Darla flips the script on a man. And you realize, oh, ladies aren't just damsels in distress.
Yeah.
Ladies can be active players in the story. But Xena takes it one step further, or rather, Hercules' introduction of Xena takes it one step further, in that not only is she, physically dominant over these men, she is commanding them. And
Yeah,
this is actually
you
a scene
find
of
out
her
it's
training
her.
them to kill Hercules.
Yep.
So it's a really great
It is a great reveal.
of who this person is, and you instantly are like, this woman is awesome
Yeah.
and fascinating.
That's
Yeah.
right. I definitely felt like Gabrielle watching that moment. I was like, take me with you.
Oh, that's awesome.
So in the first one, she
It's
I
the
don't know.
Wiles episode.
She uses her
Right.
female wiles to cause a rift between Hercules and Aeolus. And she, I guess, honey traps Aeolus there. And what happens at the end? They can't. Their bond can't be broken. Hercules and Aeolus.
Yeah,
don't.
she
does not kill Hercules.
Xena escapes into the sunset, not
Mm-hmm.
having paid for her crime.
Right. And the second one, you see like that amazing scene of her actually pillaging the villages, burning them, using the chakram to kill dudes. She catches the chakram and it's like super bloody and it's amazing. Her control over the soldiers kind of like starts being diminished.
That's the episode where suddenly she seems to have this honor code. She
Yeah.
doesn't kill women and children.
Right.
And
Yeah.
her men seem to be getting restless because she's a bit too
Yeah.
And
too much
there's
of a goody two-shoes.
That sort of coup, that one guy.
And
Darfus.
Darfus, yes. And she saves the baby.
What a name.
Darfus.
Darfus. It really strikes fear into your heart. Darfus.
I like when she says it though. It comes out really funny.
It sounds much more New Zealander.
Yes.
Oh, wait. Okay, before we get too deep, let's talk very briefly how Xena was almost not Lucy Lawless. As happens often in the production of shows, like, you know, they cast someone else and that person couldn't do it. And it just feels like one of those, like, just really fortuitous things.
There was
that
two people.
Two people couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And the
American actresses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then, as Lucy Lawless, I think, would say, like, they, you know, just ended up hiring the local jobbing actor, like, just
Yeah.
looking for work.
She
And-
was on a camping trip at the time, and they couldn't get a hold of her.
Oh no.
But they eventually sent a production assistant out to find her in the woods
Oh my god, it's
Yeah.
amazing.
and brought her to set.
So thankfully, they didn't get lost in the woods and they found her, and everything worked out because it's one of those things where it's so iconic,
Yeah.
and you can't imagine anybody else. Like, you just can't. So yay.
Yeah,
Yay that that
but
happened.
sort of the same, not quite the same, but like also Renee, somebody else was offered the role, but she didn't want to go to New Zealand.
And live there. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll meet her in a bit.
So yeah,
Back to
so
Hercules.
in the second Hercules, the insubordination goes to the point where Darfus decides to kill Xena, but like they put her through the gauntlet, which is like she has to go through all the soldiers as they beat her up, and like nobody else has ever survived this, but Xena does, you know. And this is the most memorable moment for me, is this gauntlet moment. I totally lived and breathed it for like years. And then the last one, like so separate from this arc.
It's the one I call her Kelly Kapowski hair.
She totally has that. And then she has that later in Xena in an episode.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun look.
So look.
Yeah. But that's the
But
one
yeah,
where
so
she
then,
has a big old love scene with Hercules.
Yeah,
She
she
does, that
decides in the
happens.
third episode that rather than be a commander of men feared and hated across the countryside, she'd just like to be Hercules' girlfriend.
Yeah, she wants to bone Hercules. They have a connection.
Right.
Yeah.
He's been helping her out.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to see what it's like to be with a nice man.
That's right. I mean, her whole backstory is not great, dudes.
And it's kind of great because she's like, I'm going to travel with you for a while. And he's like, okay, I'd like that. And then they have sex. And she's like, I'm going to move on.
What a great lady.
Yeah.
The best lady. But yeah, so you have these episodes introduce her character, a bit of her backstory, and then move her to the point where she kind of is ready to start her own show, which is now she is looking for, you know, forgiveness and redemption for her past behavior.
Yeah.
And Xena takes it to the like highest level and makes it way better than Hercules.
Yeah. In Hercules, a lot of these things feel like tropes. She can kind of say things like, I've done terrible things. Sleep with me, Hercules, and then maybe I'll be a good guy.
Yeah.
And
And then she was going to get killed, and he was going to man paint about it.
And then he'd man paint. He'd be like, "Oh, you could have been such a wonderful person, Xena. I'm so glad I redeemed you."
Yeah, with my dick.
And I think by taking this character and kind of giving her own show where her story is what you're watching, all of these things that sort of felt like tropes, kind of the femme fatale trope, suddenly feel like something else. They feel like a character and a really stirring situation. Like Xena immediately asks all these questions, like how did this character get this way, and what can she do next, and what does it really mean to redeem yourself? Like how is it as easy as sleeping with a hero? I think not.
She walked off that show into her own, and everything was much better. Like literally from fighting style to just quality of like intense dramatic storytelling. Everything was just so different on Xena. And that's why that show got better ratings.
Eventually it
did. So there.
All right. So I feel like we have approached...
Yeah, we're there now.
Actual Xena Warrior Princess.
Let's do this. 101. Sins of the Past.
Yes.
Okay, so Xena, I thought it was so striking. The first shot is her riding out on her horse from the fog.
With some bagpipes.
Yeah, I mean, again... We will talk about this.
Oh, and actually the fog, you think it's fog, but then there's a reveal that it's actually smoke from the village she burned to the ground.
Interesting, because I was going to say, again, I mean, this is a vague spoiler, but in the series finale, Xena and fog is a very interesting visual.
Fog
going
is very
into the
cinematic.
Fog. Versus, I mean, yeah, it's also good
the
for the budget.
Hero
it's good for the budget.
Out of the mist, but in this case, it's a mist of her own making.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I feel like on that point, there are certainly a few shots in the first season too we will reference, and that you should keep in your mind grapes.
Yeah,
for freeze
sure.
frame for later.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So she goes and there's like a burnt village, and there's like a small boy who's like, "Hey, lady, hey, you got any food? Because this evil lady, Xena, she just burned this whole village down."
Right. We do have to reintroduce our
hero. And Xena's like, "Aw, shit.
I guess I have to give all my food to this small boy."
Yeah, and they do this, like, reaction shot as she rides off on this boy. Like, seriously makes you question whether he just conned this woman or not.
Everybody rides into town. He's like, "Oh, the evil warlord Simeon killed my family with your name, right? Give me all your food."
And they do. So this kid knows what he's doing.
I love that, like, some of her first lines are literally refusing to give a starving child her own food.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great setup for, where she is still.
She's a great character.
Yeah.
Very good.
She doesn't do the right thing at a snap of the finger.
Right.
Yeah.
She interrogates it.
So after that, she is a very important scene where she buries her armor, right? So she puts the breastplate in there.
And her chakram.
The chakram,
and
which
her sword.
the chakram is still bloody, and that's such a good note. It is incredible. And she's having like a moment, kind of remembering like the screams of her past.
You think she's remembering
no, she
the
is.
screams of her past.
But she is. It's like echoey, so she is, and that then you realize that she's actually also hearing like real ones. So she's like, "What?" And then, yes, guys.
In comes a bunch of poor village people who are being rounded up by some warlord's goons. Yeah. And you're like, "Oh no, poor random extras, a bunch of sad village people. Oh dear."
Yeah. And Xena hides in the bushes.
None of them looks like they might be important for later. They just look like random extras in peasant outfits.
So you have this confrontation happening, and Xena is basically in a shrubbery in
she's
her
hiding.
shift. And there's really great shots of her just in the background, kind of out of focus through all of the warlord goons, just kind of observing what's going on. And what's going on is that you have Hector, who is the guy in charge, basically, round up all the villagers there.
And steal the women. It's very specific.
Yeah. Very specifically to do, I'm sure, horrible warlord things to them.
Probably sell them.
And sell them to terrible things, etc. And so you have one in particular villager of great import.
That doesn't look it. Gabrielle!
Yay! Introduction to our second main character.
Stands up for the rest of the villagers and says, just take me.
Yeah.
And Hector isn't having that. He wants them all, but he's amused. He's amused by her gumption. And who else is amused?
Xena. So it's this moment where this, very unsuspecting girl steps out, to self-sacrifice herself really for her village is the moment where Xena takes action and starts to actually protect them. And we have to
talk about, I feel, what does this moment mean for Xena prior to her interfering?
Yeah.
Like, what is she really doing by burying her armor? Is she taking on like a different life for herself? Is she deciding she's going to just start over and, putting her warrior self in the past?
Uh-huh.
Or is it some kind of self-sacrifice?
What did you think?
Is it a suicide?
What did you guys think when you first watched it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, I took it as the metaphorical imagery of her trying to bury that part of herself.
The past, yeah.
I'm not sure that
the sins of the past.
Yes.
Sins of the past.
Yes.
I'm not sure that I went as far in my head as it being like, I'm getting rid of my armor, so now I'm going to be on some kind of suicide mission.
Mm-hmm.
The rest of the episode, she does seem to just want to go home to Amphipolis for forgiveness.
But
that's afterwards.
That's after a bunch of stuff. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. We when I first saw it, it never occurred to me that it was a suicidal act.
Gesture.
To me, it felt definitely like someone who needs to remake themselves and has to bury everything connected to the old life and just sort of step out in her shift, like she's a newborn.
Yeah.
Looking for that next thing that will give her an identity. And in a way, that's exactly what happened. She does find that next thing that will give her an identity.
Right.
It's the defending of others and, what Gabrielle wants to do for her village but isn't really physically able to do yet, which is defend them. Xena can do that. She kind of takes Gabrielle's mission and makes it her own.
Yeah.
So then can, therefore, unbury the armor that she just buried to kind of figure out how to use it for good instead of how she had been using it in the past.
It's almost like she earns that armor. She fights in nothing but her skivvies and does pretty well. And then right at the moment where things are looking bad for her, she reaches into the dirt and out comes that chakram. Yeah.
Let me read.
It's also, really she just met Gabrielle, you guys.
She just met Gabrielle and was really inspired by it.
She was so inspired by her that she was staring at her and then got knocked out because Gabs distracted her.
That was a note that I had, was so distracted by Gabs gets knocked over.
It's funny because Gabs is so just kicking and flailing.
Yeah. That guy trying to pick her up.
Not exactly a
It's not graceful.
presence.
Let me read what R.J. Stewart said regarding sort of Xena's...
R.J. Stewart is the writer of this
episode.
He's
like him and Rob Tappert are like the showrunners basically, and so he's like one of the main dudes, and he wrote this one, yes. So, the great awakening that Xena had in Sins of the Past can be stated thus. I've lived a life of a death maker. Now I've had an epiphany, a revelation, a vision. I see what I've done, the consequences, the suffering I've caused. Perhaps I'll destroy myself so I can hurt no one else. Wait, people are in trouble. I'll help them. That's it. I'll give my life to protecting innocent people against people like me. And will that redeem me? Maybe, if I do it long enough. But really, it's up to someone else to decide that. I must keep working to help people. I don't want to be forgiven in a ceremonial way, so I feel better about myself. Did the people I kill for greed and revenge ever get a chance to feel better about themselves? I must continue to protect the innocent, and any time I see a way to make up for the sins of the past, I must embrace it. How it all ends, a higher power will decide, but I know my mission, and I will give my life to it. So, yeah.
Emotion.
I didn't see it as like a suicidal kind of gesture, but I guess it sort of was. Like, you're supposed to interpret it that if she buries the armor, she won't get into a fight because that's I mean, she's a warrior.
Right.
And not
like,
just
she won't
a warrior,
be able...
but a warrior who it seems like everybody hates
Yeah,
for
yeah.
one reason or another.
So
So
eventually
many
she's
people
ready
will
for
come to
somebody
find.
to like confront her about any of it, and she won't be able to sort of defend herself with armor.
Is she in that 1 minute of screen time embracing the life of a pacifist? Is that what that is?
Maybe, because she wants to go to Amphipolis, that without her armor, so we'll see. We'll see what it...
But that's the thing. It's like, can you really
I don't
bury
think she can-
something that is so fundamentally a part of you? Like,
Yeah, she cannot.
She
know what I
can't. I think she realizes that right
Yeah.
away. That's not who she is.
like 2 seconds later.
Literally 2 seconds later.
But they're living in, vaguely ancient times.
Vaguely ancient.
Of Greek, and it's not a safe time period.
No, it's not.
It's a violent time
And
period.
especially
so.
for a woman traveling alone.
Right. So speaking of women in danger, so Gabrielle
Yeah.
is amazing right off the bat. Like, I'm there. I'm ready to go
Yeah,
with
she-
this lady who I just met.
She watches Xena save them all.
Yeah.
She's very impressed by that.
Yeah.
She thinks Xena's the greatest thing she's ever met.
Yeah.
Which is true.
She hasn't met very much.
Yeah.
But she's still the great, even if she had.
Yeah,
she's still the
even if she
greatest.
had.
She probably hasn't been like 10 miles in either direction from Potadia.
But I
Yeah.
love, she tells Xena as a way of kind of explaining herself to Xena. She says, like, I've studied maps,
Yeah.
and I like the names of places. Which is so sad, not even, like, reading about places. All she's got are names.
Oh,
Yeah.
Gabrielle.
And so this is my part of the episode for Gabs' introduction where I start singing like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Like she's the odd duck in the village who doesn't fit in and doesn't feel like she belongs there and feels like there's something like so much bigger like out there for her. And like Belle, she's just reading her books and she reads the same one like 100 times because there's only so many.
so sad.
So it's just it's Gabrielle and her maps and stuff.
And she's engaged to a man.
She's engaged to a man, Perdiccas.
Perdiccas won.
He's fine.
He's fine. He doesn't seem that fine, honestly, because like the one line he has in this
Yeah.
episode is him like telling her to like go away.
Yeah.
No, he's
I
like,
think-
come,
He's like,
to
all right,
come
leave
with me.
this, like leave your house and come with
Yeah,
me.
introductory
Yeah.
Perdiccas #1 is not.
He's real
But
bad.
apparently he has a
Inspiring.
gentle soul because Xena says so.
Yeah.
Okay, let's discuss the dialogue here. This is
Okay.
some very important dialogue. So, having watched it in the 90s as a small child, cool, Gaps, she's great. Having watched it now, kind of like knowing the history of the show and everything, it's like, wow, Gabrielle is the only gay in the village. Like, she is 100% the only lesbian there, and she says it. She basically goes,
does say
you know I'm different from everybody else in this town, lesbian. And then Perdiccas, did you see the guy they want me to marry? And then Xena goes, he looks like a gentle soul. That's rare in a man. It's not the gentle part I have a problem with. Yeah, Gabs, it's the man part.
So it's great. Like one of the things that I was most surprised about with the show, knowing its kind of place in fandom and within like wider culture, I didn't expect the relationship between them to have so much subtext that becomes main text. I did not expect the subtext between them to start so soon.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that this dialogue is kind of coded already in this way where you can really read Gabrielle that way.
Yeah, maybe that's why the second episode they were like, let's do a heterosexual one, which we will get
We
to.
will get to very
in
shortly,
a
yeah.
second. But yeah, man, it's like really intense. Like I absolutely loved it. I loved that, she saw something that she'd never seen before, which is, maybe like a connection happened. She like fell in love with like this woman. It's wonderful. Like I just never really saw it that way until we just did this rewatch, or
Right.
for me.
But Xena rejects her.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wants to be the the soul tree in the forest or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Xena rejects her, and Xena says, I'm going to Amphipolis, and
Yeah.
you're not going to follow me because you don't want to see me mad.
So then we kind
That's
of
a
get
flirt.
the two.
So
That is
challenge
a-
accepted.
Right, exactly. That is kind of, it's like, yeah, don't follow me. Is it a challenge? I don't know.
Maybe. I think some fans do interpret it
Yeah.
as a challenge that Xena wants to test this girl's mettle. I mean, we have to remember that Xena saw her stand up for the villagers, and this was such an important moment to Xena that it convinced her maybe not to commit suicide
or something like that.
So Xena affects an attitude for the rest of this episode and beyond, as if Gabrielle means not very much to her, but the fact remains that Gabrielle is huge in Xena's life, almost from the moment they meet.
So I liked how this sets them up to have their own stories. We don't just follow Xena to Amphipolis, we follow Gabrielle
following Xena,
stalking Xena to Amphipolis, doing stuff that, you know, I've been listening to so much My Favorite Murder recently that I'm like, Gabs, hitchhiking is no good. Don't do it, sweet baby angel. But, you know, we first start to see something that early Gabrielle is very known for, which is that, you know, she isn't very physically imposing. She can't fight. You know, Lila, her sister, says, like, you know, I can beat you up. But she is very witty and, like,
she can talk her way out of things.
Would you say she has the gift of gab?
Oh, yes. I would.
She does, yes. It's amazing.
Yeah. So this is where you kind of first see her able to, like, talk her way into and or out of different situations in this episode. First with the guy who she hitchhikes with to Amphipolis, and then later with the Cyclops.
Yeah, and honestly, you can't help, like, I just fell in love with her because of her ridiculous cuteness. Like, she's a cute little... Like, she's so animated and adorable.
She's very spunky. I think I read somewhere, so this is not my quote, but somebody described her as kind of Hermione on speed. Like, just, and
she doesn't know it all.
There is a reaction, I think, from people who watch this show who don't like her at first, which I find very hard to
How can you not
because
love
I think
her?
she's just a delight. But I think people find her, like, you know, annoying or clingy or, like, you know what I mean? Like,
well, Xena is so sort of quiet and contained.
And interestingly,
Gabrielle's the opposite.
Renee herself, I think, has a problem with early Gabrielle because she said in an interview that because she had done, like, a Hercules movie right before, she thought that Xena was going to be, like, that kind of style of acting, which is, like,
she
comedic.
called it comic,
Yeah, like, so...
I would have called it children's. But I understand what she means.
But yes, so they do a lot of really funny stuff like that. It's true on Hercules. That's what I meant by completely different style of fighting and everything like that.
It's a little bit of, like, the Disney Channel.
Yeah, they don't even use swords.
It's very over the top.
Like, they don't really use swords on it. It's crazy. Like, it's just really nuts. But, so she thought she did bad in the beginning where, like, she was too animated. Like, she's like, look at my hands go.
Oh, no. That's just, she's excited.
Yeah, and so she would compare herself to Lucy, who's, like, so still and stuff. But I'm like... That's the character, man. That's like the beginning.
And she sort of said that she evolved her acting to match Lucy's over time.
But it's just literally evolving the character.
Exactly.
To match Xena's over time.
Yeah, just to be like a normal human evolving.
Yeah, no, it makes so much sense to me that she is this way now. You know, she's still like a kid. She's sort of innocent.
And do you feel that a lot of the sunniness is put on? She's trying to kind of talk her way into things, and that involves kind of being this, like, ultra confident, boasting, absurd creature.
But this is also the most...
She's probably, you know, bored and sad in her Potadia, you know?
Yeah, that's what I mean. This is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to her.
Yeah.
Like, right now, she's doing the most
exciting thing that's ever happened to us.
Yes!
She's got lots of adrenaline.
Yes!
To us, yes. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so I thought that was really
She follows Xena all the way to Amphipolis, which is... But before Xena gets there, she has a run-in with Draco, who we've not talked about. Hector's boss, the warlord Draco, who has a history with Xena.
Yeah.
And Xena goes to him basically pleading for Potadia, for Gabrielle's town. She wants Draco to leave them be. And Draco, unlike a lot of villainous characters, is pretty willing to negotiate, maybe because he's really into Xena.
Yeah.
And it's the passion part of the credits, the power, the passion.
So much passion in this. There's a lot of eye sex in their scene where she goes to him and makes this plea for Potadia, and he offers her an option, which is that she can join up with him as his fellow warlord.
Yeah.
And he'll save Potidia. And at least the way I interpret Lucy's acting in that moment, I think she's pretty...
into it?
She's into it. She would do it. It would spare this town, which she now has an emotional connection with, and it would, you know, she'd go back to the way things were in this way where she could kind of feel good about it. Like, oh yeah, I'm doing this again, but you know, it's like in good circumstances.
That's such a great moment. Yeah, I don't think I've picked up on that.
I think it's a real temptation in that moment. He's
such a believable
very
temptation.
charismatic.
To go back to what you know,
man.
but like feel good about, like, oh, I did something good, so it's okay.
We'll eventually find out that Xena has a history of hooking up with other warlords in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
Like, so here is an option for her, and I think it's a pretty good option. He's not horrible.
Yeah.
But she is the stronger person in this interaction, and she rejects him. She will not save Potidia if that's the cost.
Is walking the path, is staying on target.
Yeah.
But he says something interesting to her in that scene, which is she tells him that her, rather than joining up with him, she's going to go home. And he tells her what happens when you go home. He tried it once, and his dad almost beat him to death with a blacksmith's hammer, which I think is an amazing line. Gives a lot of insight into who Draco is as a person and where he came from. And I think it really just explodes this whole notion of what a warlord is. Like, he's this traumatized person.
Yeah.
I think you're supposed to, think about that for, like, all the other warlords that you meet throughout the run of the show. Or
none of them can go home. Home is where a parent is going to beat them to death with a blacksmith.
Unless your dad is a warlord. Unless
Yeah.
your dad is a warlord, and that's, like, again, the next episode, yes.
Yeah.
So I think Draco is a very significant character in the Xenoverse, in that he immediately comes in and shows you that not only is Xena sort of a warlord capable of redemption, but presumably all of them are.
Yeah.
All of them have a past. All of them come from somewhere and originally had good intentions with what they're doing and could theoretically
Which
be
is
redeemed.
what the guy from the next episode, Darius, wants to do with the warlords there. So it's interesting that they're following up on that.
I think there's a lot of immediately interesting ambiguity baked into these storylines. There are no black hats and white hats. Like, everybody.
Oh, that's what makes this show so good, is because everybody falls in the spectrum of humanity.
It's not a children's show.
Yeah.
You don't just have monsters and dudes with swords to slay the monsters.
He could so easily just be like a goon, like just a silly baddie with a hat that's...
Some of those do appear. Some of those do appear throughout the run of the show.
But I think it's important that they...
It's a good start.
They start with these guys. They start with people who are like Xena in every way.
Yeah.
Like, Draco calls exactly what's going to happen to Xena when she goes home, which is that she is not going to be warmly embraced by her kinsman. And we should now talk about that scene.
Oh, yes. So she does finally get home to her mother's
Which is a great introduction. Like, I love when she rides in and she, remembers Amphipolis via these ladies who are... What are they doing?
They're singing.
They're harvesting, like, wheat.
Wheat? Yeah.
These bundles, and they're just such, like, village ladies.
They're
and
singing
amazing
detail.
Yeah, they're singing, like, a folk song.
I feel like this is, like, that image of the ladies and their song, that's what was in Xena's head as she did everything, at least in the early days. I
For
feel like
sure.
She was trying to protect this vision of her hometown.
Yes.
Like, this is the thing that she took with her as she murdered and pillaged other villages, which was she was doing it to save those ladies and that field.
Absolutely.
And I think you really feel
she gets this, like, homecoming, like, smile, like, this familiar smile on her face. She sees this, like, she breathes it in, and it's really moving. But of course she arrives, and her mom runs a tavern, which is cool.
Her mom is the coolest.
Her mom is one of the greatest TV moms. I'm going to just go out and say it. She's the best.
I'm going to say, she's up there. Like, she's Maggie Scully level.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Excellent.
Absolutely. They're my faves.
The second, like, before she even utters a line, she pulls Xena's sword out of the scabbard and points it at her.
Yeah.
It's such an amazing image.
Like, that's her mother.
Yeah.
You know?
And later we're going to find out more amazing factoids about her.
So many. There is a wealth of amazing factoids about CYRENE.
Because you wouldn't expect anything less from the mom of Xena.
Some TV moms, you feel like as soon as you're not like around them, they're like put on ice, just waiting for you to come back. And I feel like CYRENE gets up to some shit.
Yeah. She lives her life. Yeah, for sure. She's really not into Xena. I mean, she feels ashamed for her, and we'll later kind of discover that.
It's brutal, I think.
Yeah.
I feel like she almost gives Xena an "I'm not mad, I'm disappointed" speech, and it's brutal. It's so brutal.
It's like as the blacksmith's hammer, basically.
It is. I mean, she, obviously she's not abusive, but she no longer feels like she has a claim on this person, and that's just so sad. It's so sad for Xena to come home and find that like home does not want her.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, her daughter's a big murderer.
And is responsible for the death of
most of the townspeople's
son,
but also most of the townspeople's sons.
Yeah, everybody's sons.
So she thinks that Xena's there to get more men for an army, right? Because
it's
Draco.
So interesting too, because like, wasn't this a good thing? Xena successfully defended Amphipolis against another warlord who we'll eventually meet, and you would think that people on some level would be like that. Good job, Xena, you did that. It's amazing to me that Xena was so bloodthirsty that even though she successfully defended this town, they're like, we hate you, we blame you for the deaths of our children, well, because not the warlord.
She took them in her army to continue her crazy warlord evolution, and that's where they kill.
Another thing that I think is really interesting about this sequence of events is that you're told very little. We're kind of adding in our knowledge from later Xena, but you don't quite understand the circumstances in which Xena did whatever it is she did to Amphipolis. Like, everyone's very angry with her. CYRENE sort of references things, and it's in a very sort of natural way that someone would reference things. I love that the show actually doesn't do a lot of exposition in this episode. It's very much just like talking in this very emotional way about stuff without explaining what that stuff actually is. So it gives like the show a lot of places where it can do flashbacks and explore and explain.
Did you want to talk about the ADR?
Oh, ADR dudes?
In the tavern?
Oh, always. I mean, this show right from the start does this thing that I find wonderful, which is say there's like a crowd scene of any kind, you will have ADR from off screen just saying the randomest hilarity. Can you think of what was in this episode?
Well, when she walks in, it's like, it's Xena!
It's just disembodied voices.
Yeah, and then it's like, you're not going to take our son. It's not great. Again! Yeah. Kind of like
it's amazing.
Those kinds of
I love lines. And that's the kind of touch that can feel like, hokey or cheesy to some, but I think it's one of the delightful, charming elements of the show itself and what it's doing with production and sound design, which we will definitely talk about in a second when we talk about the fighting on the heads.
Oh,
but we're not there yet.
Before we do that, I just wanted we didn't discuss how Draco is going to attack Amphipolis. Like, that's the point.
Draco is a bitch.
Yes. Well, here's something that Xena wanted to get home, and she just wanted to, talk to her mom, and she's just looking for forgiveness. So instead of being able to just show up at home, she has to show up at home doing the kind of exact same thing, where she's like, I need men for an army because there's a guy coming to attack you.
So my note is that Xena was going to go home stripped without her armor because she was going to bury it, right? And now she's going home in her armor, literally asking for more men the same way.
Reenacting
exactly.
Sins of the past. Yeah. And this is, this isn't an accident. This is exactly what Draco wanted her to do. Draco is punishing her for rejecting him by attacking her town. Yeah. And it's cruel. He goes even further and instructs his men to chant Xena and to fly her banners so that the townspeople will think Xena is responsible.
Yeah, a trick that lots of people who hate Xena will pull.
People love to smear Xena's name to use her own bad reputation against her, and it's very cruel.
So they do this crazy fight.
Yeah. Well, before we get there, I mean, I know, we have to go a little faster, but at
We're
home.
going to talk about the second episode for 10 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it's okay because it's just the heterosexual episode. So.
It's all about
definitely not as
And
good
this
as
is really
this one.
important.
Yeah, it's important.
We can't leave Amphipolis without talking about the scene in Lysias's tomb.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Which
Wasn't
is
that
kind of-
after the fight?
We
the
should
head
talk
fight?
very, very briefly about how
I guess. I
the townspeople are going to stone Xena to death.
Oh yeah, and okay. So
Sorry, there's so much we have to
it
talk
doesn't
about.
matter what order we do it
Okay,
in
okay,
technically, but yes, let's.
That's before Lysias.
Yeah, so while all the people are like, "Boo, we hate you,
Boo, Xena, we
and
hate
literally
you.
start throwing rocks at her like they want to kill her, we have the
Little
return of
Gabs.
little Gabrielle.
She finally finds Xena again.
And does her Gabrielle early season magic of logicking at them in a crazy way to get them to stop what they're doing. And it's just kind of like one of the first times you see Gabrielle like protecting Xena.
She saves her.
Saves her from being
That's the first time.
to death.
And it's very similar to the first time she inadvertently saves Xena in that it seems suicidal. Xena puts her sword down and is kind of goading the townspeople into stoning her. And at first, I think she thinks she's called their bluff. But then, like, a teenage girl throws a rock at her. A teenage girl, which I think is a very
how old do we
significant.
say Gabs is? at
She's a
this point?
teenage girl.
She's also a teenage girl. lots of teens.
Yeah, I think she's
But
really
a little
small.
old, maybe like 19.
Yeah, I think 1920.
Like old enough that she
Old
is-
enough that it's okay that she's traveling with this lady.
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
Yeah,
and that she's, beginning to live the life of an adult.
Right, she's
Yeah.
about to get married.
Yeah.
Well, this is ancient times, guys.
I know, it's
I
ancient
know,
times.
but let's make it a little
Vague.
better.
She's not 15, She's,
Yeah.
she's certainly like 20. If
I feel like she would be
19,
called an old maid at
18.
20
No.
in the
18,
village.
19, 20.
Old times were rough.
It doesn't really matter, technically, I feel like. But so, yes.
She
Fights?
saves Xena. No, Lysias's tomb.
Okay.
Yes.
They
An epic moment.
after being rejected by Amphipolis, basically Xena realizes she can't go home again, but where she can go is to the tomb of her dead brother. The only person she thinks she has left who understands her and can see into her heart, as she says. And she has this really lovely line over his tomb where she kind of wipes dust off his sarcophagus and says, "You always had trouble keeping your face dirty," which is such a cheesy line. But at the same time, I feel like it tells you immediately know that she's the older sister from that line, and you kind of get a sense of their relationship. And I think a lot of that first episode's writing is like that, where you'll have a single throwaway line that tells you so much about the characters.
Yeah. And I know he's like a non-character because he's dead and we never meet him, but it is fun to
meet
have.
him.
Well, yes, but he's not really a character
Yeah.
at this point. But it is cool and interesting to have your hero have a backstory where her turn to a dark side per se, and all this motivation was based on the death of a dude, which is not common.
That's
it's usually a
true.
lady.
It's reverse Mulder.
Yeah, it's
dude is
reverse Mulder.
fridged.
Yeah, so there's a wee fridging element
Yeah.
there. kind of fun little note.
Okay, I like that.
But it's interesting because you have a sense that that Lysias is sort of this sweet, innocent person who Xena couldn't protect.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a sweet, innocent person behind her who's like, "Look at me.
Yeah.
I love you, Xena. I see into your heart. Take me with you."
It's
Oh my
probably
God.
the best little moment in terms of how at that point Xena's basically it's so hard to be alone. And
Yeah, that's literally her
that's
line.
literally when Gabs walks into the background,
She's like, "You're
right at
not
that moment, and
alone."
says, "You're not alone." And there's the rest of
She has to keep
There's
this
the
little
rest of the
stray
show.
that keeps following her.
Yeah.
I mean, if Xena's fall from grace was after the death of Lysias, she's back in a state of grace. She has this new Lysias analog figure
boy.
in her
What
life.
is-
Interesting.
What does that mean for shipping?
Who doesn't want to?
But yes, I totally see the character thought there,
Yeah.
She needs somebody to protect.
So then Draco rides into town under Xena's banners, shouting Xena's name. Everyone is against Xena, including the village she wants to protect.
Yeah.
He comes into their weird hall that they have erected
Which looks
for just
really
this
cool.
purpose.
I love the lighting in there. There's like all these shafts, beams of light like going through the ceiling. It just looks really cool. It's just there's a lot of cool production design on this show that you don't expect before you've seen the show.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, it has a lot of scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like, early stuff. It's not even like when they get to the
this
really great
is
production
like,
design.
Like our first real big set piece fight ever on this show, where you really are seeing the martial arts like homages and roots in the those Hong Kong films and stuff like that, and kung fu, and it's really fun. It's really fun. And this was, I think, feel like you were worried about us thinking it was too silly.
Well, I mean, literally the crux, like the big fight, set piece fight of this episode involves them fighting on people's heads.
Yeah.
Not everybody will accept that, It's
true.
So it's a little bit rough.
And it doesn't.
And honestly, I don't even really accept it. That's the end of the end all be all of it. Is that I prefer like the real. Like, I think it would be even more amazing if it was just like a cool real fight.
Well, maybe you will love the reboot.
I don't know. We'll see. But I want to say that they the inspiration was like a Jet Li movie. So I guess
the name of it.
I guess that they had fights on heads in that one.
So one of my favorite things I love sound design generally. Like it's one of the most important things in film and TV of all times.
Yeah.
Obviously, Xena has a very exaggerated, intense style of sound design, where sort of every move is over exaggerated. You get which is why its like biggest fan website is called Whoosh, because it's based on those. Every time they move their head, they get a sound effect, which I recently learned and super fell in love with is called Kung Foley.
Oh, I love
it! Yeah,
that's awesome.
So like obviously based on like early martial arts and stuff, but it's even one of those things where in TV it kind of goes back to like, this is clearly doing that particular thing, but you have the like comedy fighting and Three Stooges. So, like, that's where you kind of get.
They do a lot of that with Jackson.
Yeah.
They do a lot of that.
Exactly,
With
that
Jackson,
kind of comedy. So if that's not your thing, then that's one of the areas of the show where it's like the hard nut to crack. It's like
it just
you have to just accept it and
because
that's
part like
of the style.
You have that, and then you have like the incredible like emotional like heart of the show, and it's just if you can't get past that ridiculous fighting part, then you can't see the true innards.
Because I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah,
I think the whole show is about violence and about how violence corrodes your soul if you do it too long. But it makes violence so much fun. It's so much fun to watch. It's hilarious a lot of the time. It's playful. Like all of the sound effects create this sort of playfulness to the fighting. And I think that is Xena's point of view. She loves it. It's a good time. That's
true.
What she does for fun.
It's
so
true.
it should seem fun.
Yeah, I love that.
I guess I prefer the season 6 grittiness that's later gonna arrive.
We'll get there.
The ADR changed a little bit in that fight in the sense that suddenly the townspeople are shouting, "Go Xena!"
Yeah, they're on her side.
They're on her side.
Once they see her like taking up the sword, so to speak, to defend them, I think they come around a little bit, but not entirely, because once she wins and sends Draco packing, they offer her loot wagons that they had previously offered him, in the sense that she is also a hostile invading force that they have to pacify. Yeah. And I think that offer of the loot wagons is what convinces her she can't stay. Yeah. She's going to be treated like a warlord if she stays in Amphipolis. So it's kind of sad that even after triumphing over Draco, like this, it doesn't mean she really wins her kinsman's love. If anything, she just wins their obedience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she pieces out of there.
Yeah.
She pieces out.
Are we at the end of this episode where we only have one more scene to talk about?
Yes, we do. The very important
our very
scene.
First Gabrielle.
But we should quickly mention that then CYRENE forgives her and
calls
her her little one.
Oh no, and then the hug. Yes.
Yes, we should talk about how great that is. It's great.
It's such
CYRENE's
a wonderful
amazing.
Which is what
moment.
she was looking for.
That's all she really needed from Amphipolis. So in a way,
it's over. I guess there's
she
no more
needed
show.
a hug from her mom.
That's true. She's redeemed right there. She's her mom's
End of
baby
show.
again. Yeah.
Oh
Turn
my
it off.
gosh. Oh no.
Yeah, I loved that. That part was beautiful.
It really
Yeah.
is. It's so moving.
But I mean, she can't accept that, and especially so readily. Like, she's got a lot to keep.
So it
keep
ends
fighting
with this
for,
campfire scene.
It ends with the very first Gabrielle and Xena talking around a campfire scene, of which there will be many more
And they're all amazing.
to come. Gabrielle's trying to camp in the woods, and she can't because she doesn't have any skills, whereas Xena has many.
Yes.
She has not
Many
said that yet,
skills.
but we will come to find. And they have their first little talk where she's Xena's basically like, I'm taking you home in the morning. This isn't the life for you. I can't have you hanging off me all the time right now. And Gabrielle's basically like, I won't go home. I won't stay there, and she has said many times that she will say, I guess at this point she hasn't said many times, but that's not the place for her, and she's kind of decided that she wants to be a particular way, and she's going to do it, and Xena cannot shake her. No. Good.
In part because they're the same.
Yeah.
Gabrielle needs to convince the world she isn't just a simple villager, and Xena needs to convince the world that she isn't a horrible warlord, and they're kind of going to meet in the middle.
Do you think it's like a Carol moment, like that beginning? Like Xena's her Carol?
I mean, Xena is her Carol. She's this experienced older woman who's taking her under her wing.
They had their glove lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was wonderful, and friendship is born.
Yeah.
The beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Oh my God, yes.
That is what they say at the very last beat is actually them walking off, and Xena's like, where I'm going, there's going to be trouble. Why do you want to do that? And Gabrielle's like, because that's what friends do. They stand by each other when there's trouble.
And then Xena's like,
says,
okay, all right.
Or, okay, friend.
Air quote, friend.
Air quote, friend. The beginning of a great adventure, and then really amazing pilot setting up these two characters. Really beautiful work setting up these two very important characters.
It does so much in 40 minutes, and I think, and not just setting up the two characters, but setting up that whole world, and kind of setting up, as we've been talking about, this sort of moral landscape is really complicated.
Yeah, and the tone of the show, which is that it gets very sad and very funny. Both are in the there from the start.
So good.
So impressive.
All right.
Moving on to episode 2, Chariots of War.
Yep.
AKA the
heterosexual episode.
Can we
So
agree
says
that
fandom.
this is the most heterosexual episode that was ever in
Yeah,
Xena?
because they're
I
really
think it's
pushing
just a lot.
Well, because
of
both
it.
of them, it's not just one boyfriend of the week, it's
Exactly.
2 boyfriends of the week.
Everybody has a boyfriend. There's lots of discussion about settling down and having babies, and nobody says, no, I got a better option. They're just like, sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely the most pushing the heteronormative agenda ever. It starts with Gabrielle and Xena walking to this town, and Gabs is telling the story. It's one of her great early season 1. She likes to tell the mythical tales, 2 lovers that were so in love that Zeus made them into entwining trees in this forest, right?
And Xena says she thinks that the strongest trees stand alone. Which is...
She definitely
But
does.
she also says that the 2 lovers should be made into boats.
Well, that was the most. I thought that moment was the first real spark of real grouchy Xena.
Grouchy Xena is best Xena.
Yeah, and because Gabrielle's and Zeus in his wonderfulness made them into 2 entwining trees. And you know what happened next? And she's like, someone came and made him into a boat. It's no.
Xena isn't very sentimental, which makes this whole episode make no sense.
Yes, I mean, this is not one of the greatest in terms of their characters, maybe.
Yeah.
I can see weirdly how they would put it as number 2.
Right. I sort of see the idea behind presenting Xena, who has chosen to do a particular thing, be presented with this option, which is probably, the most normal option for a woman at the time to settle down with this man and his family.
I was
and
talking
take up this maternal role.
Yes.
I think that's
no. I was talking more
what
in terms of the network, which was really hesitant about putting. I mean, literally they couldn't put the 2 of them in one shot in the credits together because there would be too gay. And then even like in the credits, the shot of Draco and her getting the passion part, you know, because he has the, you know, the faux hair, thing. Like faux hawk or whatever going on with his armor. They're like, oh, that looks like a woman. Like, we can't have that because that could be perceived as gay. Yeah. So like this big episode that sort of introduces these two ladies who are going to travel together. We gotta follow it up with this one where they both have boyfriends of the week
and are like, basically
confirming
the
that they're heterosexual because they are both considering like these are my guys. We're gonna settle down, etc.
Right.
So I can see how this is number 2.
Gotta get it out of the way.
But they do it, and then they get it out of the way.
Yes. So Xena decides to ride ahead in this episode and leaves. She's like, Gabrielle, you stay.
At this point, she's made the decision that it's okay to have Gabrielle follow her, but Gabrielle at this point really has no ability to protect herself physically. So she is like finding her safe places to stay.
Like a gross tavern.
It seems so inconvenient for them both.
Yeah.
Gabrielle does nothing but sit around places waiting.
Right. And I think, with the crux of this episode, I don't think she was meant to be sitting around waiting so long because Xena gets injured and that's how she ends up in this guy's house.
Yeah. Well, the reality is that this episode was originally a Hercules episode. So there was no Gabrielle plot at all. Obviously, it was just this guy Josh Becker sold the script because he's from the Hercules writers' room because they were so crazy with their production.
Are you saying there was a Hercules episode where Hercules gets injured and this man tends to him?
No. So they did Control Find the word Hercules, switched it to Xena. They also switched, it's probably like Daria, and they switched it to Darius or Darius or whatever his name is. But yeah, so they had to invent this like plot for Gabrielle, which honestly I liked. For the most part.
Well, I was surprised. Like, I know it's kind of like played for laughs a little bit, but like, I did like those parts in the tavern where you see like how aggressive like the dudes are to her.
Yeah. Hey, Blondie, tell me a story.
I mean, it's upsetting, and she has only enough money, I guess, to pay for sleeping.
No dinars.
So she's starving. In this tavern full of aggressive, disgusting men.
And they want to buy her drinks, but then they expect something.
Sure. So, I mean, that's no fun.
Yeah. It's really rough for Xena to just leave her there. And honestly, I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. And the fact that she didn't send the messenger, that's another thing. Like, she just stayed
forgot.
with that family the whole time. Oh boy.
Yeah, she didn't. She could have maybe sent a note.
Like a pigeon, maybe? Just
pigeon.
Something. So Xena rides up ahead to check for, like, there's, like, a river that they need to cross, whatever. She just rides away because the script told her to. And, she comes upon this village that's being attacked, right?
In the midst of building a barn.
Oh, yeah.
I had such, like, witness vibes.
Yeah. I was going to say they're raising the barn. Yes. Actually, I really loved that episode. You're introduced to this guy, Darius, and his 3 kids, like 2 boys and a little girl. And, they're, like, hammering and, like, trying to build this thing. And the little girl who doesn't speak, she sees these chariots coming over the hill, and she signals to her dad, like, oh, look. And when he looks, they're not there. And he's like, oh, you're silly. And then, when she looks back, they're there because they were going down, dipped in the hill, so they were out of sight. It was such a really cool reveal that the next time you see them, they're like right there.
Yeah, and a clever way of kind of using New Zealand scenery.
Yeah. But it just made sense. Yeah. So it was really cool. And obviously these guys attack, and then Xena comes and like she fights them off, and she gets arrowed.
Yes.
She catches two. One gets her.
She needs 3 arms. Catch them all.
Well,
we'll get there.
You have to wait for the episodes.
That'll be a fun one to looking forward to that.
Oh boy.
We will have a conversation.
So then she is an invalid in Darius's bed.
Yeah, we have to have a really cool scene of her explaining how to get an arrow out that's not fully through.
Right. Well, she's so good in that scene because it's one of those things where the violence of it feels really real. Like she seems like she's really hurt. She's very sweaty. Tell
her about what her method acting there.
Oh. Lucy was thinking about childbirth.
Okay.
She thought, this is pain that's like necessary pain. She needs to get through it. So
Well, I was convinced that she was hurting.
it's very brutal.
But I like, they
and
made
I
her
love
look
that
sweaty
Darius
and it was good.
is, so freaked out by it that, she has to cauterize her own wound.
Yeah, because he can't do that.
He can't deal with it.
He's so sensitive. He's perfect for her.
This is one of those
Because
things,
she loves nice guys so much.
Yeah, that's definitely her type.
Like, it doesn't have to be super violent to, like, feel violent.
Yeah.
But, like, you also, that right now we're in the mid-90s, so it's still fairly sanitized as
when they
show.
kill people with the sword does not have blood on it.
and that will progressively change.
Amazingly, thankfully, by season 6.
Along with the rest of television.
It is fascinating.
That's an interesting progression to kind of watch that, the level of violence.
Yeah, so Darius and his family, they're Trojan. They just ran away from Troy.
Yeah.
They're not like even... I thought he was he was fighting in Troy and then he came back.
He eventually says that he did fight.
But they're Trojan, like they're like literally people from Troy who like ran away.
Presumably he fought on the side of Paris and friends.
Yeah. Wait, isn't that what Perdiccas fights on too?
Yeah, everybody likes
hates
Troy better.
Yeah,
It's
anyway.
funny because they're all Greek, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So you kind of feel like the most important kind of beats to hit on for this one is the idea of like Xena, the maternal
housewife
in person. Xena, the housewife, the Xena who wears a dress.
Yeah, she tells stories and bonds with these kids, which is really interesting because of part of her backstory.
And not even just her backstory, but what we've seen of her on Hercules, which is she doesn't even know how to hold a baby. She's like, what am I doing with this? But here she's very good with the kids.
Mainly because Hercules had kids and would have been really great in this scene.
And they love her.
Yeah.
We're in like it's mid-90s now. We're not at Buffy yet, but we're getting closer to the kind of like girl power late 90s situation where like when you started talking about the idea of like I don't want to say it, but here it comes anyway. Strong female character. A phrase I hate so much. The sort of conception, I think, once you get to the late 90s and you have Xena and you have Buffy is we fight, we kick ass. We're like badass and like punch things and stuff. So you kind of have this very interesting, I think, in this episode, the imagery of like Xena in a lady's like little peasant dress or whatever the hell her dress was supposed to be.
Just Xena in a dress.
Like, which is you're sort of kind of playing with these ideas of like what it means to like what people's ideas are of being like womanly.
Yeah.
And he makes her like put the dress on for going to whatever that council meeting is because like
to appease the townspeople because they wouldn't take her seriously in her warrior getup.
Yeah.
They need to see her in the dress that apparently is his wife's dress.
Right.
Which is weird.
And she really fucks it up.
And the wife's ghost is not happy about it.
It's also insane because this is a meeting where they're negotiating a peace treaty with the people who attacked them, who Xena helped defend. So I feel like Xena could go there as this actually very impressive mediator.
Right.
Yeah.
A great warrior who came to town to like defend them.
Show them the arrow wound, being like, look, bitches, I took an arrow for you.
And instead of like crediting her with this important role, they're like, can you not show up, and if you do, please come in your like best villager costume so that you won't offend anyone.
Yeah, it's really not that great of a message, I think.
No.
I did love how she had to, tear it to fight.
Yeah.
That old classic.
What's great about it is that they give it some symbolic meaning, and it gets completely destroyed. His wife's dress is within a second like a pile of rags.
And I liked how Xena didn't really want to put it on, not just because like she didn't want to be in a dress, but like it is weird,
It's
weird. That's just the situation is odd in the first place.
I think ladies, like if a man comes up to you and says, please wear this dress worn by my dead wife, it would mean a lot to me. Don't do it.
That's crazy.
Don't do it.
It's a little bit crazy.
And there's one other interesting shot of the dress, which is after Xena removes it and is putting on her armor again. It kind of gets blown by an errant gust of wind kind of over her chakram.
Right.
Which at the time I was like, oh, how symbolic. It's like, this is the choice for Xena, chakram or dress. But then it turns out it's actually a plot point.
Yeah, she forgets the chakram.
Like, obscures the chakram and she forgets
which is the weirdest thing ever. I don't believe that Xena would ever, you know, it's like literally, that's her phone. You know, have you ever left?
Symbolic
you'll check for your phone.
It's hilarious that just become an actual plot point that's significant to the episode. Because I was like, oh.
But that's the second time the ghost, the wind blows. Like we were like, that's the wife's ghost.
The first time she puts the dress on, she's sort of looking at her image in the mirror. And,
and there's this gust of wind
than what we have seen.
That's actually a really beautiful moment when Xena looks in the mirror. You feel like, in the same way that maybe her burying her armor in the first episode was about, I need a new look. I'm not this person anymore.
Right.
Like maybe this is the person she'll be.
A new persona.
Yeah, and I think that's really maybe maybe it's inspirational for this really great later season 1 episode where she sort of gets to live this life of like a lady who is betrothed and wears a dress.
Right.
Season 2.
Oh shit! Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh no! I want it now. Wow.
But I know what episode you mean.
Yeah. Bummer.
Yeah. So I think that stuff is interesting. Or the wind is, his dead wife.
I think that's. I think it's the ghost.
Don't wreck my dress.
Yeah.
Oh, you did.
Or
I'm gonna steal your chakram. Take that, Xena.
Yeah. Or it's just a sexy wind.
But only when she wears a dress. I don't know. That's very specific.
But yeah, I do like that concept of the idea of being able to like perform a certain way and to try on a new like look to symbolize being a different type of person, which is kind of what they were going for.
Yeah.
But it's like 2 seconds. That's not gonna take for Xena.
Yeah. I mean, the crux of this episode is that these warlords are attacking this village.
Full of pacifists.
And
they're attacking them because they're pacifists, which is pretty gross. They're like,
yeah, that's bad.
We're offended by your pacifism, so we're going to kill you knowing you won't defend yourself.
Oh, boy. So there's like the main warlord, and then he has a son. This was an interesting relationship, I thought, actually, because this was the first time I thought that they treated it like a business, like this guy who runs this business of being a warlord and his son who's going to take over wasn't the favorite son who's like really into it because that guy was killed, right? So this is like the
Xena, we come to find out.
Yes. But this is like the son
Or
who's supposed to take over the business, but he's not really like into it. He wants to kind of like make peace with it. He's not really like a warlord at heart.
Is it like someone else we know who might not want the same things that their parents want for them?
Maybe.
And their name is Gabrielle?
Maybe. And then that's why they have such an OTP meeting in this bar.
Yeah.
Where they're just meant to be. They're
right.
the trees in the forest.
Kind of having the, he's like, I don't want to go into my dad's business. She's like, I don't want to be the person. I think one of the good Gabrielle moments in this one, she sort of has this great quote where she says, I'm grateful for the way that my parents raised me, but I'm not going to spend the rest of my life paying for it. Like that way, like I made a choice to be a particular way and I chose it, and that's what I'm doing now. Like just because your parents raise you to be a particular way doesn't mean that you need to like go into the family business or like that's, spend the rest of your life being like, well, this is what everybody wants me to be, so I will be that way. Like she's like, no, I'm grateful, like everybody was great, but this is not me. I love that.
That's great. Yeah.
And she successfully kind of convinces, I think his name is Furus, the warlord's son, that he can break with his father and choose a different path.
Yeah.
And in that final scene, he refuses to kill his father, even though that might be best for everyone.
Yeah.
And poor Xena has to step in and do it for him.
Yeah.
And I found that very significant in that the show has a history of kind of introducing pacifist characters who don't want to be violent and think there's a better way of doing things and commit to it. And inevitably people try to kill them for feeling that way. And it's always Xena who has to kind of step in and commit murders to make sure that these sweet people can remain sweet people.
I think early on there was a lot of Xena literally killing the bad guys every episode. I feel like it tapers off a little bit later, but it was just such a strong parallel to Hercules where think, you don't have Hercules going around like literally murdering a bad guy, because it's like, even though he's a bad guy or whatever, gonna take him out, put him in prison or something, I don't know. But literally the fact that she's going around like this guy dies.
In most shows, kind of in this genre, the script makes sure heroes aren't going to be in that position. Like, something intervenes to make sure that they can just, knock them unconscious.
Yeah, exactly.
Send them to jail, or just kind of like hit them and have them fall, and you kind of don't ask too many questions about whether or not they're alive.
Yeah.
But here, Xena is very explicit in that, like, you literally see that sword go through this guy's armor. You see a bloody wound.
Yeah.
He's dead, and you see the look on Xena's face of being like, oh dear, I killed this guy.
She killed him with his own sword, no less.
And in front of his son, like it's horrible. And I think you do have this sense that she did it because she didn't want the son to have to do it. Right. And the father says that he would have been proud had his son done it. Oh, yeah. And that's how you know it was the wrong thing.
Right.
But that's what I mean. Like, warlord business is really interesting. Yeah.
So Xena's sort of trying to disrupt the warlord business by, making sure this cycle of violence doesn't continue. But she's also doing the cycle of violence. Yeah. So I think these are all issues that the show will raise and continue to raise and interrogate. And even in this slightly stupid episode, I think it's pretty impressive that it kind of is dealing with this stuff already.
So the big set piece was the big chariot race.
Yep.
What do we think of that?
Good looking, fun chariot racing.
Race.
I was actually taken by how it became like comedic at the end with her saving Gabrielle.
Oh my god!
And you kind of have, in the early seasons, production peeps have referred to her as kind of like early Gabs being the damsel in distress because Xena needed to save someone every episode. So that was, I think, the cute part of the chariot racing where she has to jump off the horse onto the chariot,
and then Xena lifts her by the scruff.
Yeah, she basically lifts her up like she's a little baby Simba. It's adorable.
So cute.
It's really cute.
It's really
she's such a pocket
sweet.
person.
And then they're fighting that you have that kind of your standard kind of, it's a car chase really, and they're like bumping up against each other. And she takes care of the other one by cutting their separating them from the horses. And you have this sort of glorious celebratory moment between Xena and Gabrielle, and then you have this turn to the road shot of the POV shot of the road with the thing in their way,
a grassy knoll.
And then go flying.
Because lady drivers, guys,
come on. Vera bad.
Come on.
Points off, Vera. Points.
So this
off.
is the first of 3 chariot races throughout the show.
Okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it is.
They want to reuse their little chariots,
and it's very exciting if you're gonna have a show about ancient Greeks.
Yeah, you're gonna have.
Yeah, you have to. And I'm glad they did it straight out. Like, good for them. And I thought it was a really cool looking chase scene.
They were in some kind of really cool looking. It's like a drag racy area.
Yeah, it's like riverbed.
Did the Fast and the Furious come out yet?
No.
So then they stole it from this. Yeah. So that, is there much more to say about this episode?
My concluding thought is, I think it's interesting that then the final scene, we're back in Darius's village. And once again, just like the end of the first episode, we have sort of a village elder being like, hey, Xena, thanks for the help with defending us against that warlord. Can you please get the fuck out?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I'm doing it. Don't worry.
It is true.
It's hard
I didn't mention this.
Forgiven when everybody's like, please fucking go away now.
Please.
Still.
But we didn't mention this, but
hates her no matter
before that, like, when she did try to raise an army in that village, just like, Amphipolis. So she did almost...
Those are her skills.
She's this close always to kind of slipping because, her number one thing is like, oh, I got to defend something and I got to raise an army.
Her instinct is to empower people to defend themselves, and hence raising an army is how you do that.
Yeah.
So, how do you do that with a bunch of pacifists? You can't. And
yeah.
Maybe she's realizing that, actually, like, empowering people to defend themselves is forcing people to commit murder. And it's not a great thing.
But it's also really bad for her AA recovery from doing the murders.
From being a warlord
which is,
herself.
she was just so ready to go and get this army from these people that would have easily led her to, from her path.
So in a way, it's good that the temptation keeps getting defeated, because each of these villages where maybe she could, claim a home and raise an army to defend that home, they're all like, we don't want you. Please leave.
Please leave. Yeah.
I have another final thought as well.
Sure.
Which was that one time where Xena said to Gabrielle that they needed to have a talk about Gabrielle's taste in men. Which I was just like, that is a little bit pot kettle, but we have not gotten there yet. So.
Well, in this episode, they both love pacifists. So they actually have amazing taste, I guess. They're both really boring pacifists.
Does this wrap up the episodes? What do you guys think of them?
I think it's a solid start to a great show.
I thought the first one is amazing.
So strong.
That's awesome.
The second one is fine.
But I think there's such a history of shows that have maybe more than 10 episodes, or like more than like the British version of what is now the norm, but like a network
when you have
standard.
24 episodes.
Yeah, I feel like always the second ones are always like a little bit not great, like they're the next one, because you either go all out for the pilot, and then kind of pick it up again like by episode 4. I mean, I don't think many of them ever have like an insane second episode, so I think that they just focus on getting your show picked up.
And in this case, it was an episode of Hercules. So
yeah, there you go.
There's extra circumstance
that
for why
explains
this
some stuff.
isn't maybe as iconic a Xena episode as you'd want.
Yeah, did you guys want to do any kind of like favorite parts or no?
Oh, all of it's my favorite part. It's so hard to do a favorite part. Like rewatching the premiere, I felt like the end really got to me in a really intense way. The very, very end of them walking off together. Just that tiny beat of them being like, hey, friend, okay, friend, we're going to get into trouble. I was like, yeah, you are. You know what I mean? It was just like, it was just so, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was overpowering a little, just having already watched it in a way that it wasn't the first time. Because I've seen it now. I've seen their upcoming journey, so...
I think their babiness, I should
Babyish-ness.
say. Yeah, like they're so babies in this first one that like it's extra for me because they're like such intense ladies at the end, So
I mean, it's a lot like Buffy in that way. You go back to the first episodes of Buffy, and you have all these round-faced people.
Yes, they're so
and you're just like, oh my god, I
so
know all the
innocent.
horrible things that are going to happen to you, but you're so nice here.
Oh no.
We will continue to talk about all the things that happened to them in future episodes.
So join us next week.
Yeah.
Where we talk about
The
episodes 3 and 4.
Yeah, so
That's
if
right.
you're watching along, be sure to watch episodes 3 and 4.
Okay, and follow us on things like
Twitter, that's the main one, at Xena Warrior Pod. On Facebook, you can join the Facebook page, Xena Warrior Podcast. Tumblr, xenawarriorpodcast.tumblr.com. All the usual places. Subscribe on iTunes so you can download and listen to us there. And please like us, give us a rating, leave a review. It's helpful.
Tell your friends.
Yeah, tell your friends. First episode.
And watch Xena.
The power,
the passion,
the podcast.